Before we speak to Nigel Farage about his big announcement, we're going to just have a look at the reaction from the opposition. So, before he made that announcement this afternoon, Rishi Sunak was asked about Nigel Farage potentially standing.
At the end of the day, on July 5th, one of two people will be Prime Minister, either Keir Starmer or me. A vote for anyone who's not a Conservative candidate is just a vote to put Keir Starmer in number 10. So if you're someone who cares about tackling migration, both the boats and legal migration, if you're someone who wants a more proportionate, pragmatic approach to net zero that saves people money, and if you're someone who wants lower taxes, it's only the Conservatives that are going to offer all those things, and that's the choice at this election. Lower taxes with the Conservatives, a plan to stop the boats, legal migration coming down, and a sensible way to get to net zero that saves people money. That's what we offer. Keir Starmer doesn't believe in any of those things, and that's the choice that people should consider.
Meanwhile, Labour appear to be unfazed by the news. They have said that their message to voters remains unchanged. Here is what Nick Thomas-Symonds, the Shadow Minister without portfolio, had to say to GB News earlier.
Our message to voters is unchanged. It's the message I've been out delivering on the doorsteps today, in recent days, recent weeks and months, and that is that if you want genuine change, real change, away from the chaos of the Conservatives and their failure over the last 14 years, the only way to do that is to vote Labour. It is a choice at this election between a changed Labour Party under Keir Starmer and 5 more years of chaos, instability and failure under the Conservatives.
Well, Nigel Farage, the newfound leader of reform and parliamentary candidate for Clacton, joins me now in the studio. Good to see you. Busy day for you, I'm sure. Look, I've had a lot of reform briefings in this afternoon as we've covered this story for The Telegraph, saying this was always the plan. This was always the plan. He changed it at the last minute, but now he's reverted back to plan A. So if it was always the plan, why have you prevaricated and mucked about with this?
Because the election was called early. You know, I'd planned to do this. The election was called early. I was pretty, I have to say, I sort of had my legs kicked out from under me on it. I thought it was impossible, literally impossible, to fight a parliamentary seat from scratch and campaign all around the country. So I said, you know what, I'll campaign around the country. And I spent last week I was busy, you know, press conferences in Dover, the delights of BBC's Question Time with Piers Morgan. I mean, what a thrill. Then I was out on the streets for the last few days. And 2 things happened. One, I began to see a new phenomenon out there. There is a hunger.
It can't be the first time you've seen that, though. I mean, something significant must have changed.
Very significant, yes. I've never seen
new data?
No, we haven't got any data. We've got 0 data.
I just can't understand how you've gone from, I haven't had time for this, I can't do this in the time frame, we haven't got the data or the funding, to actually know I'm doing it.
No, there is a buzz out there. There is something happening, particularly among young people. That I found very interesting. But the thing that really got me was the number of people saying, but why are you not standing? And they look at you and you give a response and they look at you as if to say, you've let me down. I began to feel guilty about it. And that people's army that I'd built up in the UKIP days, the referendum days, millions of people who'd been with me for a long, long time were feeling that I was letting them down. And that feeling of guilt made me think, you know what, I can't just leave them on their own.
How much of an influence has Trump's conviction last week had on your decision-making? So what, are you just dumping the whole America project now?
No.
What are you going to do then? How are you going to... Because you said you didn't have time to campaign nationally and locally.
No, what I said was...
Now you're saying you've got time to be leader and a candidate for Clacton and campaign for Trump in some way.
Well, you didn't read the thing I put out. I said I would do my bit in the general election campaign and then spend more time in America. Clearly...
Well, how does that help the constituents of Clacton?
Well, clearly, if I'm elected for Clacton, I will not be able to spend the amount of time in America that I previously would, but I still will. So it's all about proportion.
Isn't it that you have figured, in the absence of Boris Johnson, you've taken soundings over the weekend, you've enjoyed being among the public, I've seen some of your socials, having selfies taken and all that you actually now see yourself as Britain's Trump? That you can position yourself as being extremely prominent?
I'd never thought of that. I'd never thought of that in my life.
Really?
And you know why? Some things cross the Atlantic, others don't.
OK, so it's now going to be beholden on you to put some substance behind your sound bites. So let's just talk about the policy that you said was the most important for reform of this election, and that's immigration. Richard Tice, the former leader of Reform, now has said that he thinks we should have net zero immigration. How on earth is that going to work in practice?
Do you know, you're right, Richard said that, but at least he's not lying. I just saw a clip on the news of Rishi Sunak that confirmed what I'd done today was right. If you want lower taxes, vote Conservative. Really? You want lower immigration, vote Conservative. Really?
Yes.
You want to stop the boats, vote Conservative. Really? All they're doing is lying to the public.
I know, but you need to answer my straight questions with straight answers because you get annoyed yourself with politicians prevaricating. Net zero immigration, that's just a pipe dream, isn't it? It's just,
Why?
It's ludicrous.
Why?
Because you and I know, because you're an intelligent man, that you can't have net zero immigration.
Yes,
because
you can.
Unfortunately, we do need, as far as you're concerned, migrant workers in this country.
How many people left the UK last year?
You tell me.
600,000.
Right.
So you could actually have net zero migration on current numbers.
Including in healthcare and in social care?
Well, if I tell you something, if we need more than 600,000 people a year, we're doomed. Doomed. We're finished. There will be no public services. Nothing will be left.
But are you
serious?
serious?
The fabric of society will be gone.
You're serious that the healthcare and social care sector could cope with net zero immigration?
Could they?
Who would you get to fill the vacancies?
Could they cope with 600,000 migrants here?
But can you answer my question?
600,000 people a year would still come in under current numbers on net zero migration. It's a lot of people, you know. It's a lot of people. We've had this addiction to cheap foreign labour, unskilled labour, and the bigger the company, the more reliant on it they are.
Okay,
very briefly.
And
it doesn't work for anybody.
You're expecting the poll numbers to shift. Do you expect to overtake the Tories, and if so, by when?
Well, obviously we can't tell, but I think two things will happen. I think, one, the Conservatives will realise even without me they were doomed. It was interesting, there was a big MRP poll on Sky News out at 5 o'clock, putting the Tories way down. So everyone knows. Can you
beat the Tories in the polling, and when will you do that by?
So everyone knows that the election's over in terms of who wins. But I think what will happen, this is my guess, is that from here we will take equally from the Conservatives, from Labour, and also from non-voters.
Will you beat them, and when will you beat them by?
Well, I have no idea. Have you?
Well, have you got an ambition to beat them?
That's different. Do I have an ambition?
So when would you hope to have an impact on Reform's polling
within a week,
that you overtake the...
I would hope within a week we're going to be equal with the Conservatives and maybe ahead.
OK, all right.
And I think that's possible.
OK.
And it's possible because... And it won't just be Tories switching, it'll be Labour too.
All right, we need to move on, but thank you very much, Nigel Farage, for joining me this evening on Vote 2024. Obviously, we've changed the name of the show because Nigel will not be able to continue with his GB News show in light of recent events. I think it's fair to say that. Now, let's speak to Adam Cherry now. He's GB News' reporter, and he's been in Clacton all day to gauge reaction to this news. Adam.
Yeah, good evening, Camilla. I'm standing in front of the Clacton Pier where Nigel will launch his campaign tomorrow. As you say, I've been trying to get a feel for what the local people think. And I would say the overwhelming impression is one of disillusionment with politics in general. I think the first thing to say in terms of the other candidates here is that Giles Watling is the Conservative candidate, and he won here in 2019 on 70% of the vote. He had an enormous majority in 2019, and he won pretty comfortably in 2017 as well. However, the spanner in the works here is what happened before that. So in 2015, in the general election, and in 2014, there was a by-election here. And that was won by Douglas Carswell, who was the one and only UKIP MP. He won here very comfortably in both of those contests. And in the 2016 referendum, this place voted 70% for Leave. And you can feel it when you're here, as you talk to people, that the promises over Brexit and particularly over the 2019 Conservative manifesto, there's a feeling that those weren't delivered on. So Giles Watling has said today already that he's happy to show Nigel around the constituency, but he won't sacrifice his constituency on the altar, quote, of Nigel's vanity, of Nigel Farage's vanity. So he knows he's got a serious fight on his hands here. There's also the Labour candidate, who is Jovan Owosu Nepal. He is a local trade unionist, a young trade unionist, and he was selected about a month ago. He says his main campaign priorities are on social housing and social justice. Now, Labour would have, this probably would not have been natural terrain for Labour in this election, but they would have hoped to chip away at that enormous Conservative majority had this announcement not come through. But it's certainly true. In my experience talking to people here today, that Giles Watling will have a serious fight on his hands.
All right, Adam Cherry, thank you very much indeed for bringing us that update from Clacton, where all of the action is happening this evening. Now, as I've said, Nigel Farage will stand for Reform UK in Clacton, but here's a list of the people who have declared their candidacy in the constituency so far. As Adam's mentioned there, Jovan Owusi-Nepal will be standing for the Labour Party. Natasha Osben will be standing for the Greens. Giles Watling is the Conservative Party candidate. Matthew Bensalem is the Liberal Democrat candidate. And as I said, Nigel Farage is there for Reform UK. Just to say, we did invite all of the other candidates onto this show this evening, but none of them got back to us in terms of appearing. But we will, of course, continue to invite all of the candidates of that constituency onto GB News as the election campaign continues. Don't forget that we publish all of the candidates' lists when we refer to them on the GB News website once it's finalised. Well, coming up next.